Good afternoon, classmates. I am Jessa Almonte, together with Miss Hazel Aldana, Miss Christine Joy Candelaria, Mr. Jericho De Luna, and Mr. Linmer Dua. We are the Group 1. So, we are now on Lesson 2, which is Biodiversity and the Health Society. Lesson objective and introduction is my part. Biodiversity and ecosystem changes in biodiversity to be reported by Miss Hazel Aldana. Threats to biodiversity and consequences of biodiversity loss to be reported by Miss Christine Joy Candelaria. Nutritional impact of biodiversity, health, biology, and biodiversity is to be reported by Mr. Jericho De Luna, and environment-related illnesses to be reported by Mr. Linmer Dua. Here are the lesson objectives. Lesson objectives: at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to determine the interrelatedness of society, environment, and health, create a diagram that would show the relatedness of species in forming up a diverse and healthy society without compromising one another, and identify everyday tasks and evaluate whether they contribute to the wellness and health of biodiversity and society or not. So first, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is all the different kinds of life you'll find in one area, the variety of animals, plants, fungi, and even microorganisms like bacteria that make up our natural world. So, ang biodiversity ay ang kabuuan ng lahat ng nabubuhay sa ating planeta o sa isang lugar. Kasama dito ang mga halaman at hayop na direkta at hindi direktang nakikinabang sa isa't isa. Number 2, where is it? O saan nga ba natin matatagpuan yung biodiversity? Biodiversity is essentially everywhere, ubiquitous on Earth's surface. So, sabi nga dito, yung biodiversity ay matatagpuan natin kahit saan tayo pumunta. So, yung ubiquitous, sabi ng Google, ay nangangahulugan na nasa lahat ng dako. So, kahit saan tayo pumunta, makikita natin yung biodiversity. Number 3, why is it important? Each species and organism work together in ecosystems to maintain balance and support life. Biodiversity supports everything in nature that we need to survive: food, clean water, medicine, and shelter. So, lahat ng species and organisms ay nagatulungan upang mapanatiling balanse yung ating kapaligiran at upang makasuporta ng buhay. Yung biodiversity din ay sinusuportahan nito yung lahat ng nasa ating nature na nakakatulong upang makasurvive ang isang tao, ang isang hayop, tulad ng pagkain, ng malinis na tubig, ng gamot at ng bahay. Number 4 ay, what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms, as well as the weather and landscape, interact together to form a bubble of life. Ecosystem contains biotic or living things and abiotic or non-living things. Biotic factors include plants, animals, and other living organisms. Abiotic factors includes rocks, temperature, and humidity. Ecosystem can be very large and or small. So, ang ecosystem daw ay isang komunidad ng di buhay na bagay at mga buhay na organismo sa kanilang kapaligiran. Mga bagay tulad ng hangin, tubig at lupang mineral na nakikipag-ugnayan sa isa't isa bilang isang sistema. Itong mga bahaging abiotic at biotic ay tinuturing na konektado sa isa't isa sa pamamagitan ng mga siklo ng mga pagdaloy ng enerhiya at ng pagkain. Dahil ang ekosistema ay binubuo ng mga interaksyon sa pagitan ng mga organismo at ang kanilang kapaligiran. Sila ay maaaring maging kahit anong laki, subalit madalas ay pinapaligiran nila ay tiyak at limitadong lugar. Ngunit may mga ilang siyentipiko na nagsasabi na ang buong planeta ay isang ekosistema.
Ecosystem and biodiversity. Biodiversity is defined as vast variety of life forms in the entire Earth. It encompasses all kinds of life forms, from the single-celled organism to the largest multi-celled organism. Its definition is in the structural and functional perspective and not as individual species. Another definition of biodiversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources including terrestrial, marine and other aquatic ecosystems and ecological complexes of which they are part. This includes diversity within species, between species and of ecosystem. Biodiversity is the source of the essential goods and ecological services that constitute the source of life for all. It has direct consumptive value in food, agriculture, medicine, and industry. Understanding biodiversity within the concept of ecosystem needs a thorough study on the relationship of the biotic living organism and the abiotic the non-living organisms. Interdisciplinary approach is needed to study the ecosystem. Biodiversity plays a major role in this natural dynamics. For example, a large number of golden snail in a certain area of rice field on a positive view, the larger number of different species in a certain area can be a predictor of sustainable life in that area. Therefore, we as human inhabitants of the ecosystem must preserve and conserve the biodiversity of all creatures. In simple terms, it is true that people will always depend on biodiversity on the wellness of our being and in our everyday lives. More so, our health all ultimately depend upon the products and services that we acquire from ecosystem. Somehow there are ways and processes in the ecosystem that are not apparent nor appreciated by us human beings. Change in biodiversity, alteration in any system could bring varied effects. A change in biodiversity could have erratic effects not only in wildlife or marine life, but also in human beings. We can clearly infer that when our ecosystem is not well taken care of, biodiversity encounters change that may impact human health on such different levels. Ano nga ba ang kahalagahan ng biodiversity at ecosystem? Ang biodiversity ay ang pagkakaiba-iba at pagiging natatangi ng bawat organism na matatagpuan sa ating daigdig. Kinakatawan nito ang lahat ng may buhay, gaya ng hayop, halaman, punjay at microorganism. Saklaw din ng biodiversity ang tinatawag na ecosystem, katulad ng kagubatan, kabundukan, ilog, karagatan at maging ang kapaligirang gawa ng tao, tulad ng mga bukirin o sakahan. Ang ecosystem ay binubuo ng kombinasyon at ugnayan ng mga buhay na organismo at di buhay na bagay sa paligid tulad ng lupa, tubig, sikat ng araw, klima at iba pa. Susing usapin ang kombinasyon at ugnayang ito sa pananatili ng biodiversity. Ibig sabihin, ang pagkawala at pagkasira ng isang bahagi ay maaaring magdulot ng pagkawala, pagkasira ng isa o higit pang bahagi. Ito din ay tinatawag na web of life o sapot ng buhay, kung saan nakasalalay ang timbangan ng kalikasan. Mahalaga ang pangangalaga sa biodiversity. Ito ang matitiyak na mayroon tayong mga mapagkukunan ng pagkain, panggatong, kahoy, tela, dilaw na materyales para sa gamot, masisilungan at marami pang batayang pangangailangan. Ang biodiversity ang magtatanggol sa atin laban sa baha, tagtuyot at pagguho ng lupa. Magtitiyak na mayroon tayong sariwang hanging malalanghap. Sa biodiversity, nakasalalay ang seguridad at kabuhayan natin bilang tao. Ang Pilipinas ay maituturing sa bansa na may pinakamayamang biodiversity kumpara sa ibang lugar na nakararanas ng matinding init o lamig. Ang klimang tropiko ng bansa ay mainam para sa pagyabong ng iba't ibang organismo, humigit kumulang 20,000 uri ng hayop at halaman sa Pilipinas lamang matatagpuan. Kaya naman kabilang ang bansa sa 17 mega biodiverse country
trees. Ang karagataang pumapalibot sa Pilipinas ay may pinakasaganang yamang dagat sa buong mundo dahil bahagi ito ng tinatawag na Coral Triangle, ang sentro ng marine biodiversity sa daigdig, kabilang sa yamang dagat ng Pilipinas sa mga coral reefs, seagrass, pet seaweeds, pakawan, beach forest, pangisdaan, marine mammals at marami pang iba. Sentro rin ng Pilipinas ang tinatawag na agricultural biodiversity. Matatagpuan dito ang iba't ibang uri ng bigas, nyog, munggo at gabi. Ang Pilipinas rin ang pinagmulan ng iba't ibang uri ng saging. Subalit sa kabila ng lahat ng yamang ito ay tinuturing din ang Pilipinas na global biodiversity hotspot o lugar kung saan mataas ang probability ng species extinction o pagkawala ng buhay. Sa kasalukuyang tinatayang nasa 1,000 hanggang 10,000 beses ang bilis ng Pilipinas extinction kumpara sa tinatawag na natural extinction rate sa buong mundo. Sa Pilipinas, nasa 640 ang species ang nanganganib na mawala ng tuluyan. Sa buong daigdig, itinatayang 70% ng isda ang nanganganib na mawala dahil sa labis na pangingisda. Sa agrikultura naman, tinatayang 75% naman ang crop genetic resources ang nawala. Sa buong daigdig, ang mga lahi sa paghahayupan o livestock ay unti-unti nang mawawala sa antas ng 5% kada taon. Ang patuloy na pagsasamantala ng tao sa likas na yaman ang sanhi ng unti-unting pagkawala ng biodiversity na pinalalala pa ito ng patuloy na pagdami ng populasyon at climate change. Kapag hindi natin pinigilan ang pagkawala ng biodiversity, baka mawala ng mapagkukunan ng kanilang pangangailangan ng mga susunod na henerasyon.
I'm Earth, the planet that you're on, you know, but I'm not feeling so well. My temperature's rising, species are dying, floods, droughts and fires no longer surprising. I'm losing trees and my islands slowly disappear. It's getting harder and harder to make a home for you here.
Hey Earth, let me break it down for him. We're making those greenhouse gases, trapping heat in the atmosphere that come from cars and plastics, cows and factories here. We're burning oil and coal and all that natural gas, releasing carbon dioxide and methane and releasing them fast. But hey, folks gotta live, yeah.
People need to live, but look at what you give to the children after you. You need me, ooh, and I need you.
Hey, we'll stop chopping down our trees. We absorb carbon dioxide. We'll switch over to EVs. Our heart won't go for a back ride. We'll stop using plastic things and take our own bags to the store. Let's change up the way we eat, a little less milk and meat. Let's switch to renewable power, unplug and take shorter showers. But please don't stop taking showers, that would be gross. Stop chopping down our trees, stop using plastic things, carpool and drive EVs, and give back to the earth that we give and cut down the milk and meat, green power to lights and heat, and sing the song on repeat to do our part for the world that we live in. Grown-ups, take it away.
We can write our governments and tell them to change. They might say it's impossible, but we can hold them responsible and help them to lead in cleaner energy. What we do now will reverberate for centuries.
Hi guys, this is Christine Joy Candelaria, and let me share to you what are the threats to biodiversity and the consequences of biodiversity loss. So there are major threats identified by United Nations Environment Program. Those major threats are classified into 5 threats. The first one is habitat loss and destruction. Second is alteration in ecosystem composition. Third is overexploitation. Fourth is pollution and contamination. And lastly, global climate change. Let me share to you what is the meaning of those threats. First, habitat loss and destruction. This refers to the process by which a natural habitat becomes incapable of supporting its native species. The organisms that previously inhabited the site are displaced or dead, thereby reducing biodiversity and species abundance. Habitat destruction is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. Ano-ano nga ba ang dahilan kung bakit nangyayari ang habitat loss and destruction? The first main cause of habitat destruction is pollution. Invasive species, agricultural development, diminished resources such as water and food, urban sprawl, logging, mining, destructive fisheries practices, and the disruption of ecosystem processes such as altering the intensity and frequency of fires in an ecosystem. The next one is alteration in ecosystem composition. Alteration in ecosystem structure or composition can occur whenever an action changes the species composition of an area. A wetland that changes from 8% to 20% cattails serves as an example of a change in ecosystem composition and structure. The third is overexploitation. Are you familiar with that term? Overexploitation is also known as overfishing. It is the removal of marine living resources to levels that are too low for sustaining viable populations. Ultimately, overexploitation can lead to resource depletion and put a number of threatened and endangered species at risk of extinction. Humans have caused the population decline of 100 species by overfishing or overharvesting them. The next is pollution and contamination. I am sure all of you are familiar with it. It is one of the common issues that our nature faces. Let me share to you first what is the difference between pollutants and contaminants. Pollutants is a harmful or poisonous substance that pollutes something. For example, smoke from industrial establishments and transportation, while contaminants is a foreign substance or impurity that contaminates something. Contamination is simply the presence of a substance where it should not be or concentrations above background. Pollution is contamination that results in or can result in adverse biological effects to resident communities. All pollutants are contaminants, but not all contaminants are pollutants. And lastly, the global climate change. What do we mean by it? Global climate change refers to the average long-term changes over the entire Earth. This includes warming temperatures and changes in precipitation, as well as the effects of Earth's warming such as rising sea levels. There are major causes why this global climate change happens. First is because of heat-trapping greenhouse gases and the Earth's climate. Greenhouse gases, reflectivity or absorption of the sun's energy, changes in the Earth's orbit and rotation, variations in solar activity, changes in Earth's reflectivity, and volcanic activity. And now, let us move on to the consequences of biodiversity loss. Even with the improvement of the technology and science at present, we still have a lot to learn about biodiversity. More so about the consequences of biodiversity loss. However, the basic concept about biodiversity loss was from Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace. The particular species making up an ecosystem determine its productivity, affects nutrient cycle and soil contents, and influence environmental conditions such as water cycles, weather patterns, climate, and other non-biotic aspects. The loss of biodiversity has many consequences that we understand and many that we do not. As stated by Tillman, the Earth will retain its most striking feature, its biodiversity, only if humans have the prescience to do so. This will occur, it seems, only if we realize the extent to which we use biodiversity.
Nutritional impact of biodiversity. According to the World Health Organization or WHO, biodiversity is a vital element of human beings' nutrition because of its influence to food production. Biodiversity is a major factor that contributes to sustainable food production for human beings. A society or a population must have access to sufficient variety of nutritious food as it is a determinant of their health as human beings. Nutrition and biodiversity are linked at many levels, starting from the ecosystem services up to the species and genetic diversity. One can say that biodiversity is the key for nutrition. Nutritional composition between foods and among varieties, cultivars, breeds, or the same food can differ dramatically, affecting micronutrients availability in the diet. Habitat simplification, species loss, and species succession often enhance communities' vulnerabilities as a function of environmental receptivity to ill health. Healthy local diet with adequate average levels of nutrients intake requires maintenance of high biodiversity level. Intensified and enhanced food production through irrigation, use of fertilizer, plant protection or pesticides, or the introduction of crop varieties and cropping patterns affect biodiversity and thus impact global nutritional status and human health.
Environmental-related illness. Some human illness are found to be related with its environment. Include heart disease, cancer, malaria, depression, arthritis, occupational injury, obesity, disease, asthma, Parkinson's disease. Kadalasan talaga nakakuha tayo ng sakit ay dahil sa environment natin. Malaki talaga ang factor nito sapagkat kung madumi ang ating environment na ginagalawan, ay malaki din ang chance na magkaroon tayo ng sakit. Thus, activities that promote health and extend human life could have adverse environmental effect. For example, food production causes environmental damage from pesticides and fertilizers, soil sanitation, waste produced by livestock, carbon emission from manufacturing and transportation, deforestation, and overfishing. Yun nga dahil kailangan natin ng mga pang-araw-araw na pangangailangan na apektuhan ng environment, especially dun sa mga taong walang sense of thinking na hindi nila iniisip kung ano ang kapalit nito sa ating environment, kagaya ng pag-deforestation nga ni. The disappearance of species in a certain environment causes imbalance in the ecosystem, producing more chaotic changes that harm the entire ecosystem. So yun nga, kasi kailangan talaga natin ng isa't isa. Yung bawat species, lalo na sa meat, sapagkat kung wala ang isa, magkakaroon ng unbalance. Mayayanig ang ecosystem ng isang environment. People should know more or learn more about the importance of our diverse environment and how human activities can either contribute to its growth or destruction. Kailangan nating matuto ng tamang gawi upang hindi maapektuhan ng ating environment at upang hindi tayo rin maapektuhan ng ating health. There is growing importance of studying how society, environment, and health is related to each other. Kasi kung natin naunawaan ang need nito ng bawat isa, ay maaaring maapektuhan ang lahat. Katulad ng kapag ang environment ay madumi, Maapektuhan nito ang health ng tao. Kung lahat ay may sakit, ay hindi magiging functional ang society. Thus, it is timely to know about the pressing effects of species being extinct that of our ecosystem being imbalanced. Kaya dapat mag-aral at unawaing mabuti na malaki ang epekto kapag ang ecosystem is being imbalanced. Kasi, kailangan ito ang isa't isa, lalo na sa mga species. A reduction in mortality from starvation or disease can lead to overpopulation, which stresses the environment in many different ways. Like increasing use of fossil fuels, clearing of land, generating pollution and waste, and so on. According to experts, climate change could also have a serious impact on human health and could deteriorate farming system and reduce nutrients in some food. Relationship between human and environment raise ethical, social, legal dilemmas by forcing people to choose among competing values. For example, pesticides play an important role in increasing crops, but it can also pose hazard to humans' health and environment. Climate change. A significant percentage of global climate change is due to the human production of greenhouse gases. Climate change is likely to cause tremendous harm to the environment and human health, but taking steps to drastically reduce greenhouse gases could lessen the consequences of it. Community and nation wisely choose a site of factory, a power plant, or waste dump, or regulating safety in the workplace to minimize the impact to the society. Environmental health regulation. When drafting and implementing environmental health regulation, it is important to consider vulnerable subpopulation. A vulnerable subpopulation is a group with an increased susceptibility to the adverse effects of environmental risk factor due to their age, genetics, health status, or some other conditions. If an environmental regulation is designed to protect average members of the population, it may fail to adequately protect vulnerable subpopulation. Justice demands that we take care of people who are vulnerable. Human rights issues also come up with the research on environmental health that involves human subjects. For such research to be ethical, human subjects must give consent and great care must be taken to ensure that they understand that they can option out of the research project. With this in mind, a mitigating plan and a workable plan of action should be studied in order to not compromise biodiversity while at the same time promote good health among the society. At the time, it may seem impossible to really value a species singly or in detailed manner, but we have to consider the entire Earth as a single unit. A loss of single-celled species or a family of wild grass can have adverse effects in the entire biosphere. Biodiversity, seen in macro level, seems to be still vast and rich. Yet, if we look at it micro level per species, we have lost too much. Eventually, in the near future, this biodiversity loss will have a great impact to us humans. Remember this, the value of biodiversity is the value of everything.